is the news and talk of Texas. Now, it's the Rick Roberts Show on 820 AM, 99.5 FM, HD2, News Talk 820, WBAP.
Well, I know there's got to be a few 100 million more like me, just trying to keep it free. Yeah.
Rick Roberts starts right now.
All right, here he is, right here. I'm Rick Roberts. This is the Court of Public Opinion. Your voice, your opinion, your attitude on the issues of the day, 2:05 the time. Been going through this red flag law. You know, I get emails continually about, they're coming to take our guns, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. And have you heard about the red flag law? It's got several variations. The so-called red flag gun laws, they're not new here in Texas, where Senator Jose Rodriguez, he's an El Paso Democrat, unsuccessfully pushed for the legislation for, it's been at least 3 years, maybe longer than that. His measure would allow family members or attorneys to petition judges to temporarily prohibit potentially dangerous people from owning, buying, or controlling guns. Well, Rodriguez is cautiously optimistic that maybe 2019 could be different in Texas. Last month, the Trump administration called on every state to adopt their own extreme risk protection orders and directed the Department of Justice to assist them. My concern is that bureaucracy on top of bureaucracy on top of bureaucracy, the pendulum of common sense always swings too far to the right or too far to the left. It never slows down in the middle where most of us live. You know, in Indiana, it's an Indiana law they're calling red flag. A law enforcement officer may seize and keep firearms from mentally unstable or dangerous individuals. Well, it goes without saying, if you have a mental problem, you shouldn't be probably handling a gun or, for that matter, even driving a car. But who decides who the dangerous individuals are? Well, like I do on everything, when it comes to firearms or anything firearm related, I defer to David Prince. He's the owner of Eagle Gun Range. I've been out there, great place, state-of-the-art, Farmers Branch and Louisville. And I've got him with me to talk about this a little bit because it concerns a lot of people. David, how are you?
Rick, I'm great. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm trying to, it seems like every time you pull up red flag laws, you get a different version of the same thing. What's your understanding of this?
Well, the best I can tell, I mean, there are 5 states that have passed it, but you're right. You know, Vice President Pence from Indiana has an Indiana version of it that he's trying to push out to the rest of the state as a federal law. And, you know, on the face of it, who doesn't want to hand the police officers more tools to help reduce violence? I mean, on the face, it sounds really good. But all the time, you know, the devil's in the details. You start reading it and finding out, just like you said, who's actually making these decisions. I mean, our police officers are great people, and they don't have enough help as it is, but now you're asking them to make judgments. In fact, you know, the Indiana case, the person that was founded on was a gentleman who was acting erratically. They took him to the hospital, took his guns away from him, took him to the hospital. The hospital, who is, you know, professionals, decided he wasn't a danger and released him. But then he had to go back and get his guns back. Well, unfortunately, he goes out and shoots some people. So they passed a law so that police officers can take the guns if they think he's mentally unstable. Well, they had professionals decide he wasn't. Now you're putting more burdens on the police to determine whether they are or not. So you're right. I mean, it's asking basically judges or neighbors and friends to professionally evaluate somebody's mental health, or whether they have a propensity to do violence. Well, I don't know of a human being that's not has a propensity of some sort to be violent sometime in their life or to be unstable emotionally. So
see, the to my understanding, the Indiana law that Vice President Pence is so in favor of, it's called the Jake Laird law, and that's the police officer that was gunned down. And look, nobody wants anybody to put their hands on a gun that is going to go out and, shoot up a school or shoot a police officer. We just had a Richardson police officer, much in the same way as Jake Laird, was gunned down responding to a call. And as a matter of fact, David and many of the listeners raised what was it, 41,000 for the family. No, it's not going to bring back a husband or a father or a community service member in law enforcement, but it's a little something. I mean, nobody wants that to happen. My concern, David, is that if you want to know how well the government works, pack a lunch and sit outside the DMV some Friday. I don't want them running my health care, and I'm not sure I want them running something like this. This is a slippery slope, I think.
Very slippery, because what you're basically saying is you're making a law that is used to take away a person's rights from people who have not been convicted of any kind of crimes, nor have they been professionally evaluated for mental illness, and it's really based on third-party allegations and evidentiary evidence that lacks what a criminal can be able to be afforded to. They're not even there to defend themselves.
And the scary part is 22 state legislatures are considering similar bills. I'm all for gun safety. As you know, every time I talk to David, we talk about firearms, but we also talk about safety and training, and he does all that. But at the end of the day, I'm not all that comfortable with a bunch of politicians getting together with a report from some psychologist and letting them define what is potentially dangerous. I don't know. I don't have an answer, but I don't believe that's the one.
Well, and the Indiana law did define dangerous. A person may present a risk of personal injury to himself or another individual in the future, and he has mental illness that may be controlled by a medication that he's not taking, or he's under supervision. But the second definition is subject to a documented evidence that would give rise to a reasonable belief that that individual has a propensity for violent or emotional unstable conduct.
See, that's
how many times have you looked at and seen, there's a comedian that's holding a head of a president that is definitely unstable. I hope she doesn't have a gun. And Nick, De Niro wants to punch the president in the face. I mean, if those people are not showing dangerous tendencies, should they have their guns removed? No, absolutely not. I mean, that's ridiculous.
What if Rick Roberts goes on a rant in the middle of the show, which I do more often than not? Yeah, that guy's dangerous. I'm opinionated. I don't know about dangerous. David Prince is with me, owner of Eagle Gun Range out of Louisville and, of course, Farmers Branch. David, can you stick around for just a second, because I want to walk through something with you.
I have a scenario I wanted to talk to you about. I would love to stick around.
All right. David Prince, owner of Eagle Gun Range. The red flag laws, could they put your ownership, your purchasing of firearms in jeopardy? 22 different state legislatures in the wake of the Florida school shooting are considering similar measures. I got to tell you, I'm all for gun safety. And anybody that takes out a police officer, that is at the top of my list as far as punishment upon conviction. When you go into a gun store, what exactly happens once you pick out the firearm you want? I want you to forget everything the Democrats have told you. I want you to forget everything the anti-gun nuts have told you. And when we come back, we'll tell you the truth. All right, 2:17 the time. Are you in jeopardy of losing your firearms or being prevented from even purchasing one? Now, you've heard all kinds of stories. Well, this is what happens, and just anybody walks in off the street and walks away with a fully automatic 50 caliber. I've heard every nonsensical thing you can imagine. I like shooting. I've been shooting since I was a kid. Shot tournament, skeet, all of that, but. I've been to a lot of gun ranges, but David Prince is who I defer to on all gun-related issues. He's got Eagle Gun Range in Louisville and Farmers Branch. I mean, they've got everything. They've got LTC classes, basic rifle classes, pistol classes. They've got everything you want. I've been out there, spent some time. Aside from the fact that he's got state-of-the-art facilities, unbelievably well taken care of on the inventory. He's just a nice guy. You know, you meet people in your life that are stand-up people. You know what I mean? Just really not. And his wife, same thing. So I reach out to David as often as I can on gun-related issues. As a matter of fact, when the Richardson police officer was shot and killed, David said, you know, we want to try and do something. Ended up raising $41,000. But I got to tell you, when I was talking to him about that, his wife was in the parking lot of a store someplace. David, tell that story. That was pretty funny.
Yeah, Rick, I was bragging about your customer base and your listeners and how great they were. We were, you know, you were interviewing me on radio, and my wife was sitting in the Kohl's parking lot there in Frisco and Preston, and she gets out of her car. She's got, you know, Eagle gun range on the side of her car. She gets out of that car, and two people in that same parking lot walk up and say, well, I just heard about you and your range and your husband talking on Rick Roberts. So, Rick, you've got a great audience. I mean, they're everywhere. You guys are everywhere.
Well, I know when we were trying to raise money for that Richardson police officer, some folks just drove in off the street at the same time, didn't they?
Oh, gosh, yeah. No, we on at least 3 different occasions after our conversation on the radio, we had people pull into the Louisville and the Farmers Branch and said, I just heard you on radio. One gentleman gave us $1,000 check. Another one gave us, he's a retired police officer, gave us $250. Another lady gives us $500. You know, it was just amazing. The immediate outpouring from your listeners was just phenomenal. I mean, I was heartfelt grateful and proud for you and your listeners to be able to, for you to have a program that has that many gracious listeners that want to step up and help. It was
they're great. Absolutely great. I know there's a scenario you wanted to walk us through. Then I have a question.
No, you go ahead and ask a question.
All right. What I want to do, because if you watch CNN or MSNBC or, you know, even the newspaper in some cases, you get all these crazy stories about, you know, we ought to outlaw automatic weapons. What? I mean, why should people be able to walk in off the street? Tell people they walk in the front door. Hi, David. I'm, you know, fill in the blank. Never purchased a firearm. Walk, and I know you've done this before, but it's important. Walk us through the steps.
Well, for one, we're grateful you're here, and we're glad you chose an Eagle to take care of your rifle or pistol need. What we'll need to know is what it is, and they've already picked it out, and they come over, and we ask them, do they have a current driver's license or a license to carry permit? And we walk over to the counter, and we get that. If they have not got their license to carry, we have to run a background check on them. We go over while they're filling out all the paperwork, answering yes and no to whether they are legally here, or do they have any criminal background. You know, all these, there's 15 questions they have to answer. And while they're doing that, we're running a background check. We get on to national background check FBI site. We run their background check, and we can't sell it to them unless we get a proceed. So they have to be a state resident. They have to be over 18 to buy a rifle. They have to be over 21 to get a pistol. And no one walks out of here unless we get an okay from the FBI. There is nobody just walk in anytime and they can get a gun and just walk out with it. Technically, by law, they can't go to a gun show and do the same thing. They can buy it from an individual, but if that person's been there selling guns for a number of times and he's got a table, he's breaking the law. So there is no gun show loophole. But anyway, no, everybody has to do a criminal background check if you buy that gun at a gun range or a gun store.
In your estimation, is that background, I forget what they call it, but it's an FBI check. Is that pretty comprehensive? Does that contain, you know, whether they've been in a mental hospital or whether, well, obviously it's going to have if they're a felon, but how comprehensive is that?
It's supposed to be very comprehensive. Once again, it's the FBI. It's only as good as the data that goes into it. That's one of the things that they were complaining. You know, Senator Cornyn was stating that the guy that was military didn't have his domestic violence case entered into it. I mean, but it was supposed to be. By law, they were supposed to put it in there. Somebody
dropped the ball on that. They were supposed.
Yes, sir, they did.
They were supposed to share that information with the background check folks, but they didn't do it.
Correct. So there, you know, the domestic violence, any kind of crime that's, you know, a felony, or those things are supposed to be disseminated to the FBI for that background check. So it's a very comprehensive. I mean, we've had people turned down just because their name was similar to somebody else's.
Right.
So they get not turned down, but put on a delay, and then we have to wait for a while. And if we got to proceed, we proceed. If we don't sell it. We have a discretion that if we don't have a good feeling, if we don't get a proceed and we don't get a deny, by law we can sell it to them after 5 days. And we choose not to. If we don't get a proceed, we don't go forward. And I guarantee you most reputable gun dealers do the same thing. So,
well, David, listen, I appreciate your time. David Prince, owner of Eagle Gun Range and Farmers Branch in Louisville. What do you got coming up? Anything happening that we need to know about?
I'll tell you, our license to carry courses and our training is just going gangbuster after all of the violence that's going on. People are realizing, the police officers are, even if they are close by, they can't take care of you. So you need to learn how to protect yourself. And those are big things. We've lowered our price on license to carry to $50 for a 5.5-hour course. So
wow,
we're getting a lot of response from that. Our classes are packed and full. So, and then our training. We have low light training. We have the rifle and pistol carbine classes. So training's been big for us the last few weeks. So we're grateful. We've got great customers, and you've got great listeners.
David Prince, it's always a pleasure, and just want to publicly thank you for what you do for the community, not just the fallen Richardson police officer, but raised money for the 5 tragically assassinated officers in downtown Dallas. You're just a good guy, and so is your wife. I mean, she may be the boss. I don't know.
Yeah, she is. She just lets me think I am when I'm up here by myself. So,
David, thank you for spending some time with me. I appreciate it.
God bless you, Rick.
All right. Thank you, David. You too. 2:25 the time. Eric Bushman standing by in the WBAP newsroom. We'll get the very latest breaking news, and we'll check your afternoon drive. I'll tell you more about this red flag law. It's, like I said, every red flag law that I've seen is a little bit different, but it all could affect your ability to buy, possess, or keep firearms. I'm not saying let's do away with the red flag law. I'm just saying this is something we ought to watch very, very carefully. All right, 2:33 the time. Good afternoon. I'm Rick Roberts with you every day, Monday through Friday, your afternoon drive from 2 to 5. My thanks to David Prince. He's an extremely busy guy. I mean, this is just the nicest guy you would ever meet. And his wife both. I mean, I spent a couple hours with him, and it just, you meet certain, you know what I mean, Lee? You meet certain people. I mean, a lot of people are nice. And then you meet these, really stand-up people that, leave an impression. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
And he's one of those guys. Listen, anyway, the red flag law, this thing out of Austin, well, frankly, I believe it when I see it. That's what Rodriguez said on that White House support. But it's good that they're talking about these type of protective orders. Rodriguez, Senator Jose Rodriguez, El Paso Democrat, is trying to push through this legislation here in the Lone Star State. His measure would allow family members or attorneys to petition judges to temporarily prohibit potentially dangerous. This is so broad and undefined. Family members, attorneys, that's a mistake, petitioning judges to temporarily prohibit potentially dangerous people from owning, buying, or controlling guns. Well, who's not potentially dangerous? I mean, and I'm not trying to be funny about this. I mean, a lot of people are dangerous. They have a bad temper. They have this, but not to the level that they're going to go out and shoot people. Who decides that? It's the so-called red flag gun law. It's not new here. They've been trying to push this through, I think, since 2000. Forgive me if I don't have it right, but it's either 2014 or 15. His proposed legislation was authored by El Paso Representative Joe Moody in the House, and it was followed by other states' red flag gun laws: California, Oregon, Washington, Indiana. We told you about that. and Connecticut. They've adopted the laws, and Florida recently added a similar measure as part of the comprehensive school safety package. My concern is, I've been immersed in politics, for 25 years doing radio and television. They always take it too far. I mean, I'm all for a good idea, but not so far that you have to start walking it back legally. All right, let's go to Fred. Fred in Bridgeport. Fred, thanks for waiting. How you doing?
Oh, pretty good, Rick. How about you?
Good.
I don't know much about the red flag laws, but I had a little comment about the gun laws in Indiana. My ex-wife is from Indiana, and when we first got married, most of her relatives couldn't come for the wedding because 1,000 miles. Do you remember when you couldn't buy Coors in most of the United States?
I don't. I'm sorry. I don't. I spent 12 years in Colorado, but
that was the basis for the movie Smokey and the Bandit. Well, anyway, so we were going to go up there to see the relatives in the fall, and my brother-in-law called me and said, "How much Coors can you bring for me and my buddy?" And I told him, "Well, however much will fit in the car, I guess." And he said, "I'll pay you for the beer, and I'll get you a 5-day out-of-state permit for deer hunting, and I'll take you deer hunting." I said, "Great," because they've got monster deer in Indiana eating that corn every day. And so I got up there, and I took my gun out of the case, and he said, "My God, what is that?" And I said, "What's a 308 with a 30-inch barrel and all the bells and whistles?" He said, "You can't shoot that here." And it turns out it's illegal to shoot a centerfire rifle in the entire state of Indiana because it's all little farms, and somebody lives behind every tree.
Right.
And all you can shoot is black powder and shotguns.
Okay, see, that's odd to me. I know there's a black for deer hunting, at least. There's a black powder season. There's a bow season. Different seasons where you can use certain things. But I've never heard of that.
Me neither. I was shocked. Well, then my brother and my brother-in-law and my sister lived in Washington, and through their church, they sponsored a group of children to come to the United States from Tokyo, Japan. These children had never seen the stars because the lights of Tokyo blank them out. They'd never seen a lawnmower, and they had never seen a gun. And he took them to his trap and skeet club and let them shoot guns, trap and skeet, and they shot up entire rolls of film. We've got guns. Look at this.
I don't have any problem with. Oh, well, thank you. I don't have any problem with that as long as, the training and the safety comes first. Because obviously, a kid seeing a gun for the first time, their eyes pop out of their head. The only thing they can relate to is a movie or TV, and you don't want to relate gun ownership or using a firearm in that way. But the red flag laws, and the reason I even brought it up, I can't count how many email I get from people, they're going to take our guns away, they're going to take the ammunition away, then we can't use the gun. And you don't even have to go there. The gun control advocacy group, Every Town for Gun Safety, which I've never heard of before, they're reporting that 22 state legislatures are considering similar bills in the wake of this Florida high school shooting after it came out that multiple people told law enforcement that they were concerned about Nicholas Cruz. Well, okay, I get that. As we've talked nonstop, ad nauseum, it was never the firearm, it's, the person behind it. Why didn't somebody, block this kid? Well, they just didn't. So now what are they doing? I'm not saying that I'm not totally against this. I'm saying I need to know more about it. This thing that Senator Jose Rodriguez has been pushing for the last 3 years here in Texas seems too broad to me. I'm one of those detail guys. People that used to work for me, I drove them nuts. I'd see the big picture, but before we even moved, I wanted all the details, right? And that's what I'd want on this. Who decides who's dangerous or not? A family member can petition a judge that you're dangerous. Well, how about this? How about we allow family members and attorneys, because that's what it says, to petition to have somebody institutionalized? Because right now you can't do anything. Somebody can be totally, no disrespect intended to the mentally ill. You can have somebody that's totally off their rocker, and you can call until your fingers wear out from hitting the buttons. You can't get anything done about it. How about doing that first? That makes more sense than this. Because if you're mentally unstable and you can't get a gun, you'll get a knife. Can't get a knife, you'll get a big stick. If you can't get a big stick, you'll run them down with your car. If you can't do that, what was that one teacher in Philadelphia? I'm going to arm our teachers and students with a 5-gallon bucket of rocks in each classroom. What? Am I dreaming? No, that's true. Yeah, we've got this all backwards as far as I'm concerned. 2:45 the time. I wish I could nail down the red flag law for you, but it's different in every state. The only thing they have in common is that it's so broad. Well, your wife or your husband or your kids or your grandmother or grandfather or aunt, uncle can petition the court saying that you're too dangerous to own or possess or even buy a firearm. An attorney can do the same thing. And I got no problem keeping guns out of the hands of the mentally unstable or those people. Well, you've met people that just have anger issues and, but who's going to decide this? By the way, as a side note, I'll get to your calls in just a second. A sheriff in Georgia, he's got a politically incorrect, they say, welcome sign, went viral. Have you seen this? It's a welcome sign as you drive into his city in Harris County, Georgia. And it says, our citizens have concealed weapons. If you kill someone, we might kill you back. We only have one jail, but 356 cemeteries. Enjoy your stay. Sheriff Mike Jolly. That would get your attention, wouldn't it? I mean, I don't even think that's politically incorrect, is it?
Sounds like a jolly good fella.
He does.
Yes, he does.
I mean, our citizens have concealed weapons. If you kill someone, we might kill you back. We have only one jail and 356 cemeteries. Enjoy your stay, Sheriff Mike Jolly. I'd like to talk to him. I really would. Let's see if we can get a hold of Sheriff Mike Jolly. It's Harris County. What city is this? And previously, he defended the American flag in Christmas. He paid a little over $550 for the sign out of his own pocket. He told Fox and Friends he was humbled after receiving so much support, especially in his community. He said people made supportive yard signs and T-shirts and all that kind of stuff. He spent 20 years in the Army to give everyone the right to disagree with him or anyone else. Hopefully, if they disagree, they can voice that opinion, but if it offends them, truly offends them, maybe they're in the wrong country. Sheriff Mike Jolly, Harris County. All right, Georgia. I like that. And by the way, I saw a sign the other day. It said, caution, this is not a gun-free zone. I like that, too. Let's go to Kevin in McKinney. Kevin, thank you for waiting. How you doing, Kevin?
Good. How are you, Rick?
I'm very well, thank you.
So what I was calling in for was I got a friend. We graduated high school. I mean, he was prom king, homecoming king, voted to be most successful. Got out of college, for some reason bought a motorcycle, had an accident, ended up having head trauma. Started doing a lot of drugs after that. I mean, this guy was, as you said, off his rocker.
Yeah.
He was making threats to different people. I mean, if you watched his social media page, you could tell there was something going on with him. But immediately after that, he started buying a lot of guns. And at one point in time, his parents brought all the guns to my house, said, "Can you keep these in the safe? We don't want him anywhere near them." And I agreed, because he was going crazy, ripped holes in his wall, tore the door off the hinges, had a point for a door.
Why wasn't this guy under supervision?
They couldn't get him in.
Yep.
They tried multiple times. He did end up in jail, actually, for a little misdemeanor. I think he tried to get away from a cop. But yeah, so again, he was just doing lots of things. He was a threat to other people. He actually hit me at one point in time, broke a rib. But it's one of those things, if I knew a way to get him on a no-guns list, I mean, me, his family, friends, lots of people, they would have supported that.
Yeah.
But there was no way to do it. Now, to your effect, you said if he doesn't have a knife, he'll get a gun, or if he can't get a gun, he'll get a knife or a stick. He showed up to a house party with a pistol, a compound bow, a taser, and a buck knife. And he's just what he was walking around with.
Where's this guy now?
Living with his parents still.
Yeah, this guy should not be unsupervised.
Yeah, he's come a long way since then. He's been to drug rehab. He's doing better now. But yeah,
well, the head trauma from the original accident is probably always going to make him just a little off. And for some reason, people that, not just that, but other people that should be on medication to make them, decent people to live around, for some reason, they always go off the meds.
And that did happen. You are correct.
And
also the conflict of the medicines the doctor gave him and the medicines he took for himself, he was chemically imbalanced.
Yeah, it makes, again, with all due respect to Senator Jose Rodriguez and this legislation, I think the intent is a fine intent, but it's much too broad, and it just doesn't, I tell you what, would you be for the red flag law the way that Jose Rodriguez has promoted it?
Honestly, I don't know much about it. But one thing I think would resolve a lot of it is social media checks. I know all the shooters apparently were doing stuff on social media that were raising eyes. Same thing with this guy, Casey. My friend. He was doing a lot of stuff that. Well, there's on social media. He's trying to fight people, and
there are ways to check people out. I mean, I'm not saying it's 100% accurate, but there are ways whether it's social media or family or friends. Nobody wants to drop a dime on anybody, but you can't afford to play that game. If somebody is acting out, you pretty well know in your gut whether you ought to tell somebody. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean,
and that's what this was.
Yeah, we're not talking about a couple guys that playing beer pong at a party, have too much to drink and act out. That's one thing. But if they're totally sober and acting out and obviously are a danger to themselves and others, then somebody ought to say something.
Right.
Listen, I appreciate the call very, very much. I've just been informed Sheriff Mike Jolly from Harris County, Georgia, the politically incorrect sheriff, is going to be with us in just a couple of minutes. His latest sign, I just told you, his latest sign is you drive into his community, you see this black and yellow sign. It's, you drive into those small towns. Hi, this is the Apple capital of the world, or whatever it is. Enjoy your stay, whatever it is. Well, his sign says, our citizens have concealed weapons. If you kill someone, hey, we might kill you back. We have one jail and 356 cemeteries. Enjoy your stay. Sheriff Mike Jolly. Well, that sheriff will be with us right after the news. I love it. I think it's great. I mean, that tells it like it is, doesn't it?
It was pretty funny because when I called, he answered the phone. Usually you have to go through a whole rigmarole of trying to get to him. But he was like, yeah, I just walk here and just answer the phone.
But you go through what?
Usually, you get a secretary and
Did
someone else.
Did you say rigor mortis?
No, rigmarole.
Rickamore?
Yeah, how the whole...
Oh, rigmarole.
There you go.
Okay. All right.
There you go.
All right. David's mic has been turned off so long.
It's right.
Well, we call him...
Let me do it again.
Mickey around here for the inside joke. 2:54 the time. When we come back, the politically incorrect sheriff in Georgia.
This is the news and talk of Texas. Now, it's the Rick Roberts Show on 820 AM, 99.5 FM, HD2, News Talk 820, WBAP.
Well, I know there's got to be a few 100 million more like me, just trying to keep it free. Yeah.
Rick Roberts starts right now.
All right, 4 minutes after the hour. Welcome to the Rick Roberts Show. Glad you're along. The court of public opinion. Your voice, your opinion, your attitude on the issue of the day. With you every day, Monday through Friday, your afternoon drive from 2 to 5. You can hear us and contact us coast to coast if you like. 1-800-288-WBAP, 1-800-288-9227. I admit it, I have a bias, and I get critics all the time via email. Rick, the cop should do this, the cop should do that. Look, I see it from both sides. Both sides. A lot of my family are in law enforcement. My son-in-law is a K-9 officer. I see what it's like when they're not on the street, in the backyard, playing with the kids, cooking out on weekends, that kind of thing. People forget that police officers are just like them. They're not out looking to get in a gunfight. They just want to go home at the end of the shift, hopefully help some folks out, and go play with their kids, right? So when I saw this, I thought, oh, man, this is great. I got to share this. So I'm going to. He's a Harris County, Georgia sheriff, and you may have heard of him before. To say he's politically incorrect, kind of an understatement. I love it. His, how you drive into small cities or small communities, small towns, and it'll say, hey, welcome to, whatever it is, apple capital of the world, try our apples or whatever it is, welcome population 2 or whatever it is. Well, this is a different kind of welcome sign, and I'll read it to you right now. Our citizens have concealed weapons. If you kill someone, we might kill you back. We have 1 jail and 356 cemeteries. Enjoy your stay, Sheriff Mike Jolly. But this isn't the first time. That he's set up a sign. This, by the way, paid for it out of his own pocket. I think it was over $550. His previous sign, just a couple of years ago, defended the American flag in Christmas. It said, warning, Harris County is politically incorrect. We say Merry Christmas, God bless America, and in God we trust. We salute our troops and our flag. If this offends you, leave. Oh, man, I love this guy. How many times have you wanted to say this? All right. Sheriff Mike Jolly is with me, the author of that sign. Sheriff, great job. How you doing?
Well, I'm doing fine. Thank you very much for the call.
Man, this is what kind of feedback are you getting on the new sign?
99.9% is positive. Occasionally we'll get someone who will not be a Second Amendment advocate or a law enforcement advocate who's a little negative, but I anticipated that.
What are your? I don't know how big your department is. How many deputies? What's it like there?
I've got 80 employees.
80 employees.
Yes, sir.
And I would imagine, for at least to you, they support this, right?
Oh, yes, sir. All my staff is very supportive.
Now, where is this sign, geographically speaking? Is it as you pull into your town, or where is it?
No, it's right outside the sheriff's office. It's as you pull in to visit someone in jail or come in to see someone at the law enforcement center. It's a big welcome to Harris County sign, and then it has a little saying up under it. Now we change out our sign about every 4 or 5 months. So I've had several different little quotes in there.
I like the one about "We say Merry Christmas." Did you get any pushback on that?
Well, that was the first one. Yeah, that was a little bit more than I thought. Really, I didn't think any of my signs would get a lot of publicity, but I guess the liberal news media took off on it, and then a few lawyers from up north didn't like it, but they didn't want to come down and file suit. So I guess I'm okay.
Yeah, I think what this reminds me of, Sheriff Jolly. I was lucky enough to do one of the first radio interviews, if not the first, and this has been, over 20 years ago, with Sheriff Joe Arpaio from Maricopa County, Arizona. Yeah. And I think at the time he'd brought back the chain gangs and all of that, and people were just losing their minds over it. And he said, look, this is who I am. This is what I do. And if the voters don't like it, they'll let me know next election.
Take a look at it.
That's...
I've been in office 7 terms, so maybe they like it.
Oh, my God. 7 terms.
Yes, sir. This will be my 28th year.
All right. Tell me why. What was the genesis for putting this up?
Well, over the past 4 to 5 years, we have tripled in our concealment cards issuance here in my county. And we still are issuing anywhere from 7 to 10 a day.
Now, what are these?
Carry your weapon concealed.
Oh, okay.
Weapon, yeah.
I got you.
So those have to come through my office for their fingerprints and their background checks, and then they go to the judge to be signed off on. And I just wanted to let people know, because I go out and give classes and we talk to groups, and they always ask me, well, I have a card. When can I use my weapon? What's it good for? So I just wanted to tell people, look, you can only use your weapon when your life is in danger or the life of another. And that's basically what our law says here in Georgia, and I believe that's nationwide.
Yeah, that's pretty right. That's pretty much the case everywhere.
And that's what this sign says. It says that our citizens have concealed weapons. And if you kill someone, you might get killed back. That might be a tongue-in-cheek way of saying, be careful. A lot of my citizens are getting their weapons permit, and the law says that deadly force can be used if deadly force is shown.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely. So that was the reason behind the sign. Well, what was the reason behind the first sign? This is a politically incorrect community.
The first sign, I just got to thinking about days of past. I had a little touch of nostalgia where you could say Merry Christmas and God bless America and In God We Trust. And I spent 20 years in the military before I retired, so you could salute the flag, and we supported troops. And then basically I just said, if this offends you, in other words, if you want to fight over those words, you need to leave.
Yeah, well, Merle said it best in a song, I think. But,
that's true.
Final question, because you were very nice to come on in the last minute notice. With everything that's going on in the country, of course, the school shootings and all the rest. And,
Sure.
And like you, I grew up in a time in my high school parking lot, every car, every truck had a shotgun or a long gun, and nobody ever shot anybody.
And the doors to the trucks were unlocked.
Yeah, usually the windows rolled down because it was hot outside.
Absolutely.
And nobody ever shot anybody. Once in a while a gun goes missing, and okay, I'll give it back. I mean, what do you think? Of course, the liberals in this country, it's all about the guns. They never go to the root problem, which is the people. What's your idea as a law enforcement official? What's your idea to try and turn the corner on this ridiculous, horrific school shootings and all the rest, these mass shootings?
We've had a loss of the unit, the family unit, that we have too many parents wanting to be friends and not teaching their children how to be responsible young adults. And I truly believe that that is our basic problem, that the family unit is no longer there. We don't sit around and have supper together anymore. Too many people have their face in the TV or in the phones. Parents want to be friends and not parents. And that's just the problem that I see, not just in my county, but in my surrounding counties.
Well, I couldn't have said it better. I don't think anybody could. Sheriff Jolly, Mike Jolly from Harris County, Georgia. You got a website. By the way, I want to get one of these T-shirts. Tell me about the T-shirts.
Well, there's a local place here in our county seat that asked me if they could sell the shirts, and any funds that they make as far as a profit, they're going to donate to the Georgia Sheriff's Youth Home.
Oh, good.
So I'm not in the shirt business. I'm in the popo business.
That's great. What's your website, Sheriff Jolly?
The website here is harriscountygeorgia.org.
harriscountygeorgia.org.
Yes,
this has been great. I appreciate your time. I may call you again.
Well, listen, don't get the two Harris counties confused now, because it's a $92 bus ticket. And if I have a crazy out here, I may have to put them on a bus to get them to Harris County.
Sheriff Mike Jolly, I appreciate your time. We got to step aside, check your afternoon drive. That guy was great. All right, 3:19 the time. That guy was great, wasn't he? Sheriff Mike Jolly. That was fantastic. Let me get to some of your calls. Baker in Arkansas. Baker, thanks for waiting. How you doing?
Rick, I'm doing great. I thank you for taking my call.
You bet.
I think that guy was I think he's an amazing sheriff. But my question or comment had to do with the red flag laws you were speaking of.
Right.
At current, Rick, like that wackadoodle they had down there in Florida, is there any provision in place right now, had the FBI actually done their job, Is there anything in place where they could have removed his guns from him? And if not, does this law allow that?
This law would, yes. I don't believe this law was in place in Florida at the time, but they had, what was it, Lee, 39 police calls to his house in like 2 years. That for me is enough to say, okay, I don't need a red flag law. That's a red flag in itself. Maybe they didn't have legally what they needed to disarm this guy, but everybody knew this guy was just wound too tight. Maybe as I said, I'm torn here, Baker. I'm not totally against this thing. I'm just saying by definition, it's so broad to temporarily prohibit potentially dangerous people. All right, what constitutes potentially dangerous people from owning, buying, or controlling guns? I mean, you could have anger issues and act out. I guess that's potentially dangerous. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, sure, absolutely. I mean, there would have to be a line drawn in the sand somewhere, but at the same time, let's say that my wife and myself were to have a domestic.
Baker, Baker, can you hear me? All of a sudden, I can barely hear you.
Yes. Are you able to hear me?
There we go. Now I got you.
My question would be, for instance, if my wife and myself had a domestic dispute and she decides to leave, can she go call her attorney tomorrow and go just out of spite prevent me from owning weapons? And if that's the case, then this law should not pass.
Well, see, that's what I'm saying. I understand the intent of the law, and the intent makes perfect sense to me because you can't even get somebody to institutionalize these days. But this thing says it would allow family members or attorneys to petition judges to prohibit potentially dangerous people from owning, buying, or controlling guns. Now, this is in the state of Texas. Senator Jose Rodriguez, and I think this was authored by El Paso Representative Joe Moody in the House. I'm just saying, hey, I got the intent. Let's work on this thing a little bit, and it's just too broad. I mean, so you have a fight with your wife, and this happens more often than not. She calls somebody because she's angry or upset, or it could be the other way around. But he's dangerous. He's threatened me. He might kill people. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I guess you and I agree. I should probably allow time for other callers to disagree. So thank you for your time, Rick, and enjoy your show. We'll talk to you soon.
Baker, I appreciate the call very much. All right. Coming up right after the news, right after Eric Bushman, we'll be talking with a mayor that requires gun ownership of everyone in his town. He says that it's something for a potential criminal to think about. As this gun control debate rages on, one town has a local law mandating that every head of household residing in the city limits is required to maintain a firearm. We'll talk to the mayor of that town next on News Talk 820 WBAP.
This is the news and talk of Texas. Now, it's the Rick Roberts Show on 820 AM, 99.5 FM, HD2, News Talk 820 WBAP.
Well, I know there's got to be a few 100 million more like me, just trying to keep it free. Yeah.
Rick Roberts starts right now.
Yeah, right now. Here we go. It's Friday. Glad you're along. Normally with you Monday through Friday from 2 to 5, your afternoon drive. We've made it to Monday, taking your calls now. My thanks to Mayor Easterling from Kennesaw, Georgia, where all residents within the city limits are required to have a firearm, and they let people know about it as they drive into town. Also, Harris County, Georgia, Sheriff Mike Jolly. That is just, that's great. Our city has a, as you drive into town, you have those, welcome to, fill in the blank land, the sunflower state, or this, well, that'd be Kansas, but whatever it is, right? Now, when you drive in, our citizens have concealed weapons. If you kill someone, we might kill you back. We have one jail, but 356 cemeteries. Enjoy your stay. Sheriff Mike Jolly. I love that. And the mayor, Kennesaw, is about 20, 25 miles north of Atlanta, so it's really kind of a bedroom community. They have a 2% crime rate, 1 murder in 6 years. All right, let's get to your calls. You've heard this, I know, many, many, many times, and it's one of my favorite quotes by former President Reagan.
I've always felt the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help."
I agree with that, obviously, to a degree. Well, how are you liking things? Things working out for you? Or are you terrified of the government? Let's go to Katie in Springtown. Katie, thanks for waiting. I appreciate it. How you doing, Katie?
I'm well. I have a question about guns and marriage.
About guns and what? I'm sorry?
Marriage.
Oh, guns and marriage. All right, here we go.
Right. So the opinion that I had when I first got married is, I guess, what you would call typical Texan Republican conservative. And as I've become a mother, I find myself more identifying with the Mothers Demand Action platform and common sense legislation, but my husband doesn't. So do you have any advice about how to talk about that and come to a compromise?
Well,
Part of my issue is I have one younger son with autism and an older son with some emotional issues, so I can identify with some of the things that are happening.
Well, yeah, you get your hands full. There's no doubt. Let me put it to you this way. My daughter, I shot tournament skeet and probably my whole life when the kids were growing up. And pistol at the range probably once a week. My daughter never, ever, ever wanted to be around that, ever. But people change. When she became a mother and married, and this probably had a lot to do with it, married a guy that came back from Iraq, where he trained Iraqi police officers, came back, finished his degree, went through the police academy, and now he's a K-9 officer. I got a call from my daughter, and she said, "Dad, I'm going to send you a picture." It was her birthday. Look what her husband got me for my birthday. And it was a pink camouflage AK-47. And she has no qualms about it now. But then again, her husband is carrying 24/7, and the police dog, they build a kennel in your backyard, so the police dog's always there. She sees the other side. She sees the good that comes of policing, and part of policing is, firearms. She sees the good side of it now, where before all she saw was the gun and a loud noise, and it scared her. I'll put it to you this way. A government is only as good to the people they say they serve as the individual people we elect. We don't try to compromise anymore. It's always the right versus the left, or the left versus the right. What point of contention, specifically, what point of contention do you have with your husband about this?
I think my point of view is that, for the instance, my older son has low impulse control. And if I were an outside observer, I would say this kid should never have a firearm. That doesn't mean that he won't make a different choice once he's an adult and outside of our home. He thinks differently. I think that there are lots of moms in my boat that are seeing their children and thinking about 10 to 20 years down the road and what's going to happen.
And what does your husband say about this?
He says, well, if you start putting these red flags, then it's a floodgate, and, they can start taking them for other reasons. It's never a pure law. And I see his trepidation. I think if we had more of a commitment to mental health services, it might be a little bit better, and have those mental health services work with police. So
you are afraid, stay with me here. You are afraid of current gun laws as they may or may not apply to your son, which has some issues.
Right.
Okay, so it's not the gun necessarily.
No.
It's the person. And
right. There are some people who shouldn't have them.
Well, I agree. Absolutely, I agree. But we are filtered, our opinions, our feelings, our emotions, everything that we are as a human being, it's filtered through our own personal experience. You are a mom of 2 kids that have some issues. So everything that you think about or respond to or have an opinion on is filtered through what you believe would or would not happen to those kids. I get that totally, 100%. However, I wouldn't limit, but this is my own advice. This is just, I'm not a psychologist. I wouldn't, in my mind, limit them based on what if. Do you see what I'm saying? What if? What if? What if? Because you can't protect them from everything. It's impossible. And what if this...
another voice on the other side that's saying, hey, yes, we need to have common sense gun conversations, but we also need to over-invest in mental health. Therapists are $120 an hour. I can tell you why some of those kids did not get help, because they just can't afford it.
Well, also, we pour tons and tons of money into legislative lobbying, for this company or that company. People realize they have an issue with a child that may be, 13, 14, 15 years old. In my case, when my son was, I guess he was 15, he was 6 foot, almost 6'5" and 200 pounds. I'm not going to physically do anything with him unless I break out the 16 years of karate and hurt him. I don't want to do that.
Right.
So if you had a kid like that had some issues, where do you get the help? This Nicholas Cruz cop showed up 39 times. That's nuts. 39 times to his home. Kids were afraid of him. Why wasn't somebody able to intervene, pull him out of the student body, pull him out of being around other people until he could be properly medicated or whatever they needed to do? That's not a gun issue. That's what do we do about each other issue.
Well, I can say about our local law enforcement, they've been great. Both of my sons have been in, and they practice going to the police officer, obeying the commands, and even doing it in stressful situations just so they get used to listening to law enforcement. And I would encourage other families to do the same, that if you're in a situation like mine, to be cognizant of, a football field down, and to think about and talk about the guns in your home. And I will keep my husband and his guns, and my kids too, and I appreciate the advice.
Well, Katie, I'll say a prayer for you, and I mean that sincerely. You got a lot to deal with, and, I pray that you got the strength to do it. You sound like you do. Your husband's very fortunate to have you, and so are those kids. 12 minutes after the hour, 4:12 the time. I'm Rick Roberts, News Talk, 820 WBAP. All right, 4:18 the time. Man, I've got this. I really wanted to get to this. I'm going to have to wait till Monday maybe on this. Christians and white people get unmerited perks, live easier lives, and are not worthy of some of the things they get. That's a college course. You want to know what's wrong with America? Here you go. And here's your sign. All right, let me go to Mike in Dallas. Mike, thank you for waiting. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
You bet.
My question is on this red flag about the firearms.
Yes.
If they can take your firearms, are they going to be able to take your vehicle?
I guess if they feel you're crazy enough to go running through a crowd with your truck, who knows?
Well, why wouldn't they? I mean, where are they going to stop?
Well, see, it's just, I don't, as I said several times now, at the risk of being redundant, I don't know that I'm totally against this. It's just too broad and undefined for me. It would allow family members to petition judges to prohibit potentially dangerous. What does potentially dangerous mean? Define that for me. And family members, how far? I mean, as well as I do, there are some family members that can't agree on lunch, let alone anything else. It's just not defined enough.
That's right. I mean, look at divorces and, parents arguing over their kids and, one gets mad and makes up stuff or, this is a slippery slope.
Yeah, this I don't think will pass in the fourth attempt. They started pushing this back in 2014 or 15. I don't think it'll pass in Texas, but the scary part is 22 different state legislatures are looking at similar laws. This effectively, I got no problem keeping a firearm out of the hands of somebody that's, clinically I don't know what the politically correct word is of the day. If they're nuts, that sounds clinical, doesn't it? Or if they have some other issues, but you got to be more defined than potentially dangerous. So say the family members. I don't think that's the way to go. Mike, I appreciate the call. Sounds like you're at work, so I'll let you go. Steve in Lucas. Steve, thanks for waiting. How you doing, Steve?
Good afternoon. Wonderful. Hope you are too.
I am. Thank you.
Great discussion to have locally and nationally, and so complex. I think so complex because we really haven't addressed it for so long, and so it's become like a rabbit hole. I have in my family, my brother-in-law, as handsome as a movie star, he's an adult, has behaved in such a way, he's down in Harris County in Texas, where he's been picked up by the men in white jackets, literally 2 separate occasions, taken into Harris County. But he knows just enough, and he's paranoid and schizophrenic, knows enough to not take the medicine, to stick it under his tongue or spit it out or something like that. So there's just no, and then they let him out in the 48 hours or whatever it is.
Right.
And everybody knows that, well, with him, hopefully he never hurts himself or others, but that's the only thing that'll get him the help he needs.
Well, the key word there is hopefully. You know, what happens?
And, okay, the slippery slope we could go down with the legislation, it's really, don't you think it's really good to examine what legislation would be necessary? Because we have to be able to preempt some of these people who are so violent. But we look at even, I don't want to get off the track into Obama and Loretta Lynch and Comey and all that, but we can see even in our law enforcement at the highest levels, if people want to get together and conspire to mess somebody over, they can.
Sure.
And they very easily could do it to put somebody in the mental hospital, as a for instance. Do you know of any systems that work really well on being able to intervene for adults who are mentally ill against their will, but that actually work?
Not one.
Oh boy, that's it, isn't it? Right there.
I mean, yeah. I mean, you know, you've got everybody, you know, tearing their hair out and gnashing their teeth and wringing their hands. What do we do about guns? Well, that's a peripheral to the root problem.
Yeah.
It's
the people.
And you know, that's why I said a while ago, a government is only as good as the individual 535 people we elect to run it. And if we've got the wrong people, I mean, think about it. You got 536 counting the president, running the government for 300 million people. You know, it's supposed to...
And so many of them not even listening when they get there.
No. I mean, look, Harry Reid, whatever the Democrats said, okay, I don't think he voted against the Democrats once. And he came to Washington poor as he could be, left a multimillionaire. That's not the way the government's supposed to work. And that's why when Reagan said what he said, it caught my ear. You know, it's give it up on the guns for goodness sake. Let's go to the root problem, which are the people behind them.
Have you heard of any systems anywhere in the world that seem to be able to be just and get mental health help to adults against their will? Against their will,
and that's the key. I've heard stories. Anecdotal evidence is all I have. I don't have any personal knowledge, but I've heard stories about Europe and some places in Europe that used to or have now what we used to have. I mean, you know, the Democrats, the liberals in general, we can't have insane asylums, is what they were called. And they came up with politically correct names later. We can't have those, you know, we don't know this. You know, they bank on all this psychological information to allow people to do things. But then they say, well, psychological evaluation isn't enough to institutionalize somebody against their will. Well, which is it? Make up your mind.
Well, and then could I ask you a question? Piggybacking on what the woman said a couple of calls ago, her son doesn't have a mental illness. I don't mean that. She was concerned about his impulse control.
Right.
But if you've got a minor who clearly has a mental illness, do you know what the threshold is at which something can be done against that minor's will?
No, I do.
And if he's in treatment when he's a minor, when he becomes an adult? Can he then opt out any way he wants?
Well, in some cases, you have to say yes. Because he's no longer a minor under supervision, and he can't be forced to do something unless he's been clinically evaluated as a threat to himself or others, and that happens very rarely. Very rarely. I'm probably the wrong guy. I don't put a lot of stock in the psychobabble. I just don't, because it's such an if I have a broken arm, you can see it, I can feel it, they can set it and fix it. When it comes to mental issues, it's so inexact. How do you know it's right? How do you know it's wrong? You only know after the fact, and then it's too late.
Well, thanks for having the discussion. I really appreciate it. Good deal.
Steve,
as always, I love those the sheriff and the mayor. They're great.
Oh, they were great. They were great indeed. Wouldn't it be nice to have a city the size of Dallas with the sign as you're driving in, our citizens have concealed weapons. If you kill someone, we might kill you back. We have 1 jail and 356 cemeteries. Enjoy your stay. All right, good afternoon, 3:32 the time. I'm Rick Roberts. This is the Court of Public Opinion. Your voice, your opinion, your attitude on the issues of the day. And makes no difference where you are, coast to coast, it's toll free. 1-800-288-WBAP, 1-800-288-9227. Well, it seems like Georgia's got all the right ideas. I just finished talking with Sheriff Mike Jolly of Harris County, Georgia. And right now I've got Mayor Derek Easterling, Mayor of the city of Kennesaw. Mayor, thanks for being with us.
Absolutely, Rick. It's my pleasure.
I got to say, I love this. I've heard of it before, but I love this. You require, not that you're going and enforcing this law, but you require gun ownership, something for a potential criminal to think about, because the gun debate's going nuts, and the debate rages on. But you have a local law mandating that every head of household residing in the city limits required to maintain a firearm. What kind of crime do you have there?
It's less than 2%. That's a lot lower than the gun law that we have on the books was written in 1982, and it was in response to Morton Grove, Illinois. It was in response to Morton Grove, Illinois' ban of weapons in the city limits. We wanted to show that we could be responsible citizens and have an ordinance that required gun ownership. But there are caveats, to allow you, if you're a convicted felon, of course, we don't want you to have a gun. You're not legally allowed to possess one. Or if you're a conscientious objector, you don't have to have a gun. But no, we don't go door to door. And we're a little bit bigger than Morton Grove. And last I checked, their crime rate was close to 10%.
You're a town of about, 30, 33, 34,000 people?
36,000. 36,000, yes, sir.
And you're just really almost I know most people don't like the term, but almost a bedroom community for Atlanta, Georgia, right?
Yeah, that's correct. We are a metro Atlanta community.
I mean, when you were quoted as saying, when citizens are engaged, when the community is engaged as a whole, and people accept responsibility and are held accountable for their actions, I think that's what makes the biggest difference.
Yes, sir, it is.
I couldn't agree with that more. You said that's why you'd like to see gun policies established at the local level as opposed to the national level. Give it back to the people, right?
Yes, sir. Give it back to the people. Let them be the ones that are responsible for their own communities. And it's a way of looking at the ripple effect a little differently. If every community was engaged and we overlapped, we're not stovepipes. We can't operate individually or independently. We have to have overlap. We have to be able to get along. And I think if you give it back to the people, they will respond positively.
I've always said this. Everyone, all of us, you, me, everybody listening, we are our own first responder. Even though I have family in law enforcement, they're not, camped out on my front porch. It's going to take a little while to get there. So we're all our own first responder. In a criminal, generally speaking, I use the analogy, he's a professional car thief. That's what he does. That's how he makes a living. You got a car that's unlocked and the keys laying on the seat, or you got another car with blinking lights and the club on the steering wheel. Which one are you going for? The line of least resistance. If I drove into your town and knew this, I'd probably think, maybe I can go to a different town.
You would. And, the other thing that we have going for us with that community engagement piece, it's how our police department approaches, true community policing. They are engaged, social media, in person with the folks. We have a Citizens Police Academy where we train our citizens how to report crime, how to detect activity that's questionable, when to call, who to call. We have that. Our officers walk down the street and the citizens call you by name, Oh, hey, Officer Brophy, they holler at you because they know who you are. They're engaged with us. They are our eyes and ears when we can't be there in 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think you're doing all the right things. I know I talked to my son-in-law, who's a canine officer, and, prior to that, you have a beat, a certain area that you patrol every shift. Well, as a canine officer, you go where you're called, or just, you can go everywhere. And he says he misses seeing those same people on the beat over and over again. So, he even though he's off the beat, he still goes in that area. I got to ask you the downside here. Any threats of a lawsuit? Anybody pushing back? What kind of feedback have you been getting?
No, sir. No applications for protest permits or anything. I think it's, our community, we are engaged as a community. We know how to talk. We allow all of our citizens to comment during our public meetings at the beginning and end of every meeting. If you have something you want to say, come and say it. No pushback, nothing derogatory.
I think the thing that you said, you've been interviewed by Fox and Friends and everybody else, but I think something that sticks out for me, and of course, we're talking to Mayor Easterling from Kennesaw, Georgia. His town requires gun ownership. I'll say that again in case you're having a tough time swallowing that. His town requires gun ownership. It says every head of household residing in the city limits is required to maintain a firearm. But even more importantly, you said that you'd like to see gun policies established at a local level as opposed to the national level and give it back to the people.
Yes, sir.
It makes perfect sense to me. You got to be getting some attention over this. If you're on Fox and Friends, I'm sure you had a good time with them. But I'm sure you got some notoriety out of that, right?
Well, I don't know if it's notoriety, but they certainly do recognize the name Kennesaw, Georgia.
36,000 people, a bedroom community of Atlanta, and you've had, is this correct, one murder in 6 years?
In yes, sir, in just over 6 years.
Wow. Wow.
May I ask you, have you ever heard of the Americans' Creed?
The Americans' Creed, yes, I have. I'm not familiar with it enough to...
Back from 1917, I don't know if you have time on your show, but it's the idea that America deserves our engagement as a citizen. And this was something written. Do you mind if I read it to you?
No. Go ahead.
This is the American's Creed, written by William Tyler Page in 1917. I believe in the United States of America as a government of the people, by the people, for the people, whose just powers are derived from the consent of the governed, a democracy and a republic, a sovereign nation of many sovereign states, a perfect union, one and inseparable, established upon those principles of freedom, equality, justice, and humanity for which American patriots sacrificed their lives and fortunes. I therefore believe it is my duty to my country to love it, to support its Constitution, to obey its laws, to respect its flag, and to defend it against all enemies.
I'm glad you took time for that. I truly am. Talking with the mayor of Kennesaw, Georgia, Mayor Easterling. You may have seen him on Fox and Friends here. Are you aware of Sheriff Mike Jolly in Harris County?
I've heard the name.
he came out. He's the guy that puts up the welcome signs for his community. And the latest one just went up. Our citizens have concealed weapons. If you kill someone, we might kill you back. We have 1 jail and 356 cemeteries. Enjoy your stay.
It means that.
You got to get a hold of him, Sheriff Mike Jolly. It's hey, listen, I appreciate your time very, very much. All the best to you and Kennesaw. And man, just keep doing the good work you're doing.
Thanks, sir. You have a blessed day.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you so much.
You,
3:42 the time. We'll step aside, check your afternoon drive, and then I'll get to your calls on this Friday. I'm Rick Roberts, News Talk 820 WBAP. All right, 3:46 on this Friday afternoon. I'm Rick Roberts. Glad you're along with you every day, Monday through Friday from 2 to 5, your afternoon drive, broadcasting out of Dallas-Fort Worth. Toll-free everywhere, coast to coast, 1-800-288-WBAP, 1-800-288-9227. Let's go to Alice in Argyle. Alice, thank you for your patience. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm thinking about moving to Georgia.
A couple towns have the right idea.
I tell you, and just common sense. It's so refreshing. So thank you for having them both on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm glad we could get them on short notice. As this gun control debate rages on, if we would somehow, some way extract the politics from this, we could probably come up with some common sense measures, have very little to do with guns and more to do with the people behind them.
I think you're exactly right. I think currently, right now, I am very much opposed to any of the red flag laws because I think we have other things that we have to address first because the unintended consequences, I believe, are a backdoor threat to our Second Amendment rights. And what's happening in our schools, and if you look at what happened to that young man in Florida, there was a program in place where teachers were doing social emotional learning and restorative justice, and they are not the type of people who are trained to take care of a kid like the kid in Florida. We need teachers teaching reading, writing, math, and history, and then we need psychologists and therapists who are working with kids who really need help. And I think we need to get our schools back in check and our standards. Even here in Texas, we are mandating that teachers are doing social emotional learning, and I would contend that the shift away from the academics to the behavioral is what is causing kids to do the things that they're doing.
Alice, I think you're right on point. Here's the thing, and I don't push Christianity on anybody. I mean, you do whatever you think is right. I believe in God, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit, but that works for me, and it took me a long time to get there. But, as I look at it as far as the schools, when you take something out, something else fills that void. And when we took God out of schools, something else, the liberal agenda, filled that void. You're right. Teachers need to teach history, science, math, reading, all those things. If you've got a kid like Nicholas Cruz, who was obviously, again, I mean no disrespect to the mentally ill, but it was obvious to the kids he went to school with, to the police that were called 39 times to his home, he was off his rocker. He needed help. And he didn't need a teacher to walk away from his or her teaching duties to try and psychoanalyze this guy. That's not their job. They shouldn't be put in that position.
I agree with you 100%. And so before any red flag laws go in place, we need to address the psychological profiling and data collection and standards that are being mandated on our state from the federal government, and go back to the Constitution and think about what those men in Georgia are saying.
No, I think you're right. It's the last guy I talked to, the mayor of Kennesaw, Georgia, which is, for all intents and purposes, a bedroom community of Atlanta. just about 25 miles away. What he said was right on point. He'd like to see gun policies, as far as the topic of guns go, established at the local level as opposed to the national level. Give it back to the people. The local community needs to handle what they know how to handle. And teachers need to be left alone to teach. But I don't think that's the government's plan. I don't think that's the government's agenda. So we need to, and as far as the red flags law the red flag law goes, I don't know that I'm totally against it, but I am totally against this without more definition. Senator Jose Rodriguez, El Paso Democrat, he's been unsuccessful in the last 3 years trying to push for this legislation. The measure would allow family members or attorneys to petition judges to temporarily prohibit potentially. See, but what is potentially dangerous? What is that? Potentially dangerous people from owning, buying, or controlling guns. I mean, I want to solve the problem of school shootings just like everybody else. But as long as you're going after the tail instead of the head of the snake, you're probably going to get bit again. All right. Alice, very good call. I appreciate it very much. Let's go to Philip in Wichita Falls, Texas. Philip, thanks for your patience. How you doing?
Doing good, Rick. How you doing today?
Good.
All right, I got several things, but one primarily, it's only two people that can take your citizenship away from you: yourself and a county judge. Anytime you get into a situation where this red law would be, a county judge is obligated to protect the safety of the citizens. Well, if somebody comes to him like a medical professional and says that Philip Townsend Rick is a danger to society because of this, that, but what's he going to do? He's going to err on the side of an opinion, or somebody could be totally wrong and take your citizenship away from you. However, the Second Amendment, as we know, says shall not be infringed, no exclusions. I don't care if he's mentally ill, age, male, female, foreigner. I mean, it could be a citizen, but if they're an immigrant that's a citizen, anybody can own a gun. That's not where the problem is. And I want to emphasize the last point is that we hear about the AR-15 and the framers didn't intend on having guns like this when they wrote that. Well, what they didn't intend on having is a lack of God in society and a lack of the family unit in society when they wrote that.
Yep, you're right.
They figured that laws would take care of themselves and discipline will be handled. That's one thing they didn't foresee.
You're right.
Should not be infringed.
You're absolutely right. The founders never envisioned this country or the people that reside within our borders to be embroiled in this type of controversy. And you're right. Taking out the biblical principles that the country was founded on, you can argue whether the country was founded on Christianity all day long, but it was. There's no argument that it was founded on biblical principles. And when you take that away, it's a free-for-all, just like we're seeing right now. So you got to put it back.
I'm often reminded of this chaos that's ensuing is the Back to the Future when the Biff takes over and crime's everywhere and they're shooting from the front porch, and I can see that happening if we're not careful.
Yeah, well, it's going to happen unless we start supporting our police and law enforcement, because without them, you've got total anarchy, and I don't think anyone that has a functioning brain cell wants that. Listen, I appreciate the call very much, Philip. Have yourself a great weekend. 3:54 the time. When we come back, I got a question for you. You may have heard this before, but I'm going to let you hear it again.
I've always felt the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Former President Ronald Reagan with a very, very telling quote. Well, are you satisfied with your government, or are you just, as he said, terrified? We'll find out when we come back. 1-800-288-WBAP, 1-800-288-9227. Your calls straight ahead. All right, 4:34 the time. The Court of Public Opinion, the Rick Roberts Show, broadcasting out of Dallas Dallas-Fort Worth, Monday through Friday, your afternoon drive 2 to 5, and, of course, heard all through the country, toll-free no matter where you are. 1-800-288-WBAP, 1-800-288-9227. All right, something a little different. I saw this, and I thought, you know what, this might be kind of fun. Normally we're mired and immersed in the gun control debate and what Congress isn't doing and all the rest. This is kind of cool. One man was on the scene when 3 U.S. presidents were assassinated. Why are hamburgers called hamburgers even though there's no ham in them? I got to say, I've wondered that myself. The amazing fact that 3 of the first 5 U.S. presidents all died on July 4th. And why do we call police officers cops? Well, Charles Reichblum, I believe is how I pronounce it. He's also known as Dr. Knowledge. He's got a book, The All-Time Book of Fascinating Facts. Thought we'd, this is worth it if I only find out why hamburgers are called hamburgers. Dr. Knowledge, how you doing?
Good, Rick. Good being with you.
Thank you. You were a journalist for 50 years?
Yes, sir. Yeah. It's been a long time, and what I did was take the best of all the stuff I've collected over the years and put it in my new book, The All-Time Book of Fascinating Facts, and the 4 things you mentioned there are in the book. And that one about hamburgers, I always wondered about that myself. You go and have a hamburger, and I said to somebody one day, hey, there's no ham in this. Why in the world are they called hamburgers? So anyhow, I did some research and found out, and if you'd like the answer, I'll be happy to.
I would.
To pass it along. There were a lot of German immigrants who came to the United States in the late 1800s, and the people from Hamburg, Germany, brought with them their custom of serving ground meat, which was unusual in those days. And people here started calling the ground meat hamburgers after the people from Hamburg, Germany. So the name really comes from the city of origin, Hamburg. Very much like Frankfurters, that name comes from Frankfurt, Germany, where they were sausages were originally made in Frankfurt, Germany, so they were called Frankfurters. And the name Wieners came from the German pronunciation for Vienna, where wieners were made, that they call Vienna Wien, W-E-I-N, and that's where the word wieners came from.
All right, so you were a journalist for 50 years, and you collected all these interesting facts and stories and put them in one place in a book, right?
That is correct. The All-Time Book of Fascinating Facts. It's really the best of all the stuff I think I've collected over the years. You mentioned that 3 of the first 5 presidents, U.S. presidents, died on the same date, which is incredible in itself. What are the odds on that? All of unrelated causes. Why would they all die on the same date? And of all the dates in the year, it was July 4th. And, I thought that was
that's pretty amazing. The odds fact on that are ridiculous. And the story is the second president, John Adams, and the third president, Thomas Jefferson, both died on the same July 4th, as it turned out, July 4th, 1826. And the story is that John Adams was in Massachusetts when he died, and his dying words supposedly were, "At least Jefferson lives." He didn't know that Thomas Jefferson had also died that same day, earlier in the day. Wow.
Of course, there were no telephones then or no radios, so he never got the news that Jefferson had also died. Anyhow, they both died on the same July 4th, 1826, which is amazing. Totally unrelated. Adams was in Massachusetts, Jefferson in Virginia. And then the 5th president, James Monroe, by chance died on July 4th, 1831. So 3 of the first 5 died on July 4th. So that's the kind of facts that I tried to get hold of and that we have in our all-time book of fascinating facts.
You're not a stranger to radio. I guess for the past 7 years, you've been broadcasting the daily Dr. Knowledge feature nationwide on CBS Radio Network. And I guess 10 years, you also hosted the Dr. Knowledge show on KDKA. That's in Pittsburgh, I think.
Yeah, it's my hometown, right?
You've written 11 Knowledge in a Nutshell, and Dr. Knowledge Presents. I like stuff like this because it makes me think. I got to ask you, why do we call police officers cops?
Well, that name came from in the late 1800s. In most big cities in the East, the tradition was for police officers to wear big copper badges and big copper buttons. And that was true in cities like Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and so on. And when a police officer came into view, people would say, "Ooh, here comes the copper." Speaking of their big badges, big copper badges and big copper buttons. So it evolved into people started calling the police officers themselves coppers. And, of course, that name copper was later shortened to just cops. Although we also still call them coppers as well.
I've got, my grandfather was a high sheriff. He raised me. Not all, but vast majority of my extended family were police officers in Los Angeles and other places, even at a federal level. And even my son-in-law is a canine officer, and I never knew why people called cops cops.
Well, that's where it comes from. The copper buttons and the copper badges. And I guess there's still some police departments where they wear copper. But in those days, they wore big copper badges, and their buttons were big, too, the big copper buttons.
Well, I got to ask you, and it's probably impossible to answer, but the most interesting fact that you can think of, what would that be?
Well, the one you mentioned when we first went on the air, if we want to talk about that one, I think that's incredible. One man, we've had 4 presidential assassinations in our history, and one man was there for 3 of them over a period of more than 30 years, which is just amazing. And that man was Robert Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's son. He obviously was with his father right after Abraham Lincoln was shot in 1865. And then Robert Lincoln went into politics himself. 16 years later, he was in the cabinet of President Garfield in 1881. Garfield was leaving on a train trip from the Washington Railroad Station. The cabinet went down to say goodbye to him. They had some business to do. And Robert Lincoln was standing right next to Garfield when a guy comes up. He was described as a disappointed office seeker, a man that supposedly Garfield had offered a job to and then didn't fulfill the job. And this man came up and point blank shot Garfield, President Garfield, and Robert Lincoln was standing about 2 feet away from Garfield when Garfield was assassinated. And then incredibly, 20 years after that, in 1901, by that time, Robert Lincoln had left politics, went into business. He became president of the Pullman Company, which was a big deal in those days. And he was also elected president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. There was a business exposition in Buffalo, New York, and President William McKinley invited Robert Lincoln to come to the exhibition since he was head of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And just as Robert Lincoln walked in the exhibition hall, there was a receiving line, and in that line was a guy described as an anarchist later who had his hand bandaged and had a revolver hidden under the bandage. And, of course, in those days, they didn't have metal detectors. This guy got into the receiving line, and when he got to McKinley, he shot and killed President McKinley. And Robert Lincoln, again, was right there when it happened. And after that happened, Robert Lincoln vowed that he would never again get anywhere near a president. and we say in our book, probably nobody would have invited him anyhow.
Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, Dr. Knowledge, our time's up. This was fun. This was the all-time book of fascinating facts. Where do you get this if people want to pick this book up?
Easy ways. We have a website, knowledgeinanutshell.com. It's one word. You can go to knowledgeinanutshell.com. You can read about the book and order it there if you like. We also have an 800 number. It's 1-800-NUTSHELL, 1-800-NUTSHELL. Or go to our website, knowledgeinanutshell.com. I'm
gonna pick this up. It sounds like fun. I appreciate your time, Dr. Knowledge, and pick that book up. Take a look. Stuff like that. I like stuff like that. I mean, I read so much for the show. I prep so much on politics and pop culture and what's going on. But when I find something I can just read that's just fun, I try to grab it. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, it's just fun, a fun read. All right, we'll come back. We'll take your calls. You've been very patient. 1-800-288-WBAP, 1-800-288-9227. Your calls straight ahead. 4:51 the time. Our thanks to Brad Barton. By the way, Brad Barton, meteorologist, is keeping an eye on these building storms. We'll have it all right here for you on News Talk 820 WBAP. I've got just like a minute left, but I want to tell you, on Monday, you want to know what's wrong with this country? One of the things, George Washington University giving a seminar on Christians and white people getting unmerited perks. If you're Christian and you're white, you live easier lives than everyone else. You get things you don't deserve and things you're not worthy of getting. And how to deal with white Christians. You know, you took prayer out of the schools. You knew what you were doing. That void was filled by something even I couldn't imagine. Liberalism that just basically dumbed down kids for at least 2 generations. You know, I said something the other day about putting God and prayer back in schools. We put it up on the website just to see, because the websites I'd gone to, they had 100, maybe 200 people. Yeah, I agree with that. So I put it up on the website at WBAP.com. I think you have to scroll down quite a ways, like a long ways, but it's there. Put it on, I don't know, maybe a month ago, I guess. David, how many people has that reached now?
It's up to 74,000 people it has reached.
74,000 people. So please don't tell me the public at large is happy with God and prayer being out of schools. Well, Rick, you're a Christian. I'm a Hindu. Biblical principles apply to everyone. It matters not what you subscribe to in the way of theology. Biblical principles work for everyone. Unless, of course, you're a Muslim and a devout fundamentalist Muslim, and you follow the Quran word for word, perhaps that doesn't work. But for every other true theology, biblical principles work. Bring them back. You want gun control? There it is, right there. That'll control guns and the people behind them. That's too easy. Yeah, politicians won't go there. All right, that's going to do it for me. Stick around. Mark Levin is next. I hope you have a great weekend. God's blessings on each and every one of you, whether you agree with me or not, is always my priority. I'll be back Monday at 2, your afternoon drive, on News Talk 820 WBAP.
Soaking in the rain, baking in the sun. Don't quit till the job gets done. That's the only way I know. Don't stop till everything's gone. Straight ahead, never turn around. Don't back up, don't back down. A full throttle, wide open. You get tired and you don't show it. Dig a little deeper when you think you can't dig no more. That's the only way I know. That's the only way I know. That's the only way I know. The only way I know. Oh, get on it one time.